Welcome to another episode of the Doctors Building Wealth podcast. Well, today you have a solo episode with me, Leti, and what we're going to be talking about is some of the most important things that I have learned on my journey as an entrepreneur. Now, some of these things are going to be really applicable to women especially, but all of them should be applicable to almost anyone out there, whether or not you are a real estate investor and you're building a real estate portfolio business, or you have another business on the side, or even if you're running a medical practice. All of the things I'm going to be sharing with you, hopefully you're going to be able to understand how you can apply it to your own life and maybe get some takeaways that you start to use to change your experience as an entrepreneur. So, for those of you who do not know, I've actually been involved in 6 multi-million-dollar businesses in building them and creating them over the last several years. Since 2012 is actually when I started being an entrepreneur on the side of being a hospitalist physician. And so I've a lot of experience going through and building businesses and have learned a ton along the way. And that's what I'll be sharing with you today on the podcast. So, number one thing that I wanted to share with you guys is that I have gotten really comfortable with being the only woman in the room. Now, this is not only applicable to those of you who are female entrepreneurs, but also people who are maybe a little bit younger, or maybe you are a physician and you're in a room with other entrepreneurs who are traditional entrepreneurs who've been doing this forever, and you're the only one in the room as a physician who's a new entrepreneur. In all of these ways, you can feel like you're out of place. And I remember starting out back in 2012, and the first business I was involved in was a clinical documentation business. Kenji, my husband, was also involved, and I felt so out of place. I felt like I was the young one. I felt like I was the only woman in the room. We would go to meetings and it would be all me plus like men, 10, 20 years older than me. And I felt really inexperienced. Here I was as a physician, and this is the first time I'm doing any business. And I remember not feeling great. I remember not feeling like I belonged. And some of these things also came externally to me. Like I would write an email to a client and they would respond back, and they'd respond and say, "Hi, Kenji." And they would address Kenji only, even though I was the one who had written to them. And so there were experiences like that I had along the way that made me feel very uncomfortable. Then I think fast forward to a couple years after building Semi-Retired MD, and I joined a mastermind, and I was in the room with 9 other really experienced business owners. One of them was a woman, but the rest were all older men. And these were people who had been lifelong entrepreneurs. This was their 10th year in business or 20th year in business, or they had started 5 other businesses before. And here I was, a physician, building a business. Again, I felt very uncomfortable. I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like I didn't maybe have anything to add. So I've had many experiences like this along the way where I started to feel uncomfortable. So what's changed? Well, what's changed is the meaning I gave to the experience. So it's not that the circumstances have changed. It's still very common that I am the only woman on a panel with all men, or I'm the only woman on stage, or I go to a meeting and it's 95% men around me. Like that's a very normal experience for me. But now I actually look forward to it and I enjoy it. And what happened is I chose to change the meaning. And now I see it as not as I'm the only woman in the room, I don't really belong. I see it as I am representing all the women who are coming behind me. And so I've changed the meaning, and it's now about contribution. It's about setting the path and setting the stage for others to come behind me. And so when I walk into a room, I am representing now. I'm representing the younger people, or I'm representing the physicians who are starting businesses, or I'm representing the women business owners who are coming up and are going to be in that stage in the very, very near future. And so I want to carry myself with a certain gravitas, with a certain boldness, with a certain level of certainty. And certainty comes from within. Certainty is created when you decide to be certain, when you decide to carry yourself that way. It doesn't have to come from, anything that you've done per se. It really comes from within. So I walk into those rooms now with a level of certainty, knowing how important it is that I help pave the way for other people to be on that stage who are a little bit different than who you would traditionally see on that stage. And so I look forward to it, because it means that all of us are breaking into new ground that we maybe weren't there before. There are very, very few female real estate investors in the general public. Now, in our semi-retired MD community, over 60% of the people who participate are women. And so even that, we are, as women, creating more and more real estate investors who are going out into this traditionally male space and doing things differently and doing things their own way and showing up in their own way. And so for all of you who maybe feel uncomfortable in some of these spaces and as entrepreneurs, maybe because you're a physician and you haven't had a company for 20 years, or maybe because you're the only woman, or maybe because you're traditionally an excluded minority that isn't in that space, I just want to tell you that you can actually look forward to being there if you change the meaning in your mind, which is, I am representing those who are coming after me. And it changes it to be more than just your experience. It changes it to be a contribution piece. And you want to show up differently because you want to show up with that confidence so that other people can be in your space, a year or two or down the road. So that's number one. Number two is resourcefulness. Now, I think a lot of us are very resourceful people. We got into medicine because we were able to dig deep and we were able to, study for the MCAT, and we were able to get through residency, which had a lot of challenging times. Probably a lot of people had challenges in their childhood, or even as attendings, you've had challenges. You've been able to be resourceful and find a way to make things happen, even in the face of adversity, probably throughout your life. Well, entrepreneurship requires a different level of resourcefulness. It's a crazy experience of being an entrepreneur. You really are sometimes just staring at a blank screen. When you are a physician, you have a path laid out in front of you, right? You're like, okay, if I go through med school, if I get through residency, if I jump through these tests, I'm going to get there. And there's a path that's very obvious and very clear to you. As an entrepreneur, that is not actually the case. A lot of times you're sitting there with a blank slate in front of you and a free day in front of you, and you're like, what do I do? What is the highest and best use of my time right now? What's most important? What do I need to do that's going to move the needle? And I remember that feeling, and I still sometimes have it, to be honest, where you feel like there's so many things to do. You're not even sure where to start. And you're like feeling this kind of anxious feeling inside of you, like unsettled feeling. And you're like, I know I'm supposed to be doing a million things. I don't know what to do. And you feel lost. You feel very, very lost. And you are actually building from scratch. You have a blank slate and you've got to figure it out. And that develops a certain level of resourcefulness in you because you got to trust yourself and you got to direct yourself and you've got to see what's working and then pivot when it's not working. And I think about one of my mentors, Keith Cunningham. One of the things he talks about is entrepreneurship in terms of doing a startup versus buying a business. And when he talks about a startup, he talks about going to the airport, going through TSA, getting to the tarmac and seeing the airplane completely disassembled, like thousands of different pieces of the airplane there on the tarmac. And basically the flight attendant says to you, okay, awesome, you're here. You're going to have to build that airplane. You're going to have to fuel it up and you're going to have to learn to fly. And that's what it's like being in a startup, right? Because you are literally starting from scratch. And that's what it feels like to be an entrepreneur a lot of the time. You don't have anyone giving you directions. There's not a path in front of you that's laid out and well worn. You have to figure it out yourself. And you have to develop a certain level of resourcefulness to do that. Just to give you another example, we have one of our businesses where we have a partner that we're bringing in, and I can see now him going through that, right? Going through that experience of saying, oh my God, there's 50 billion things to do. How do I know where to focus? And how do I sit down and just build something from scratch, completely new, that there's no pathway for, there's no blueprint for. I have to create it from scratch. And so it's exciting if you're very creative. It's exciting when you love to kind of give what you have inside to the world, but at the same time as it's exciting, it's also can generate a lot of fear and a lot of discomfort. But the cool thing is, as an entrepreneur, you become more and more and more resourceful. And so now me looking and coaching him on his first entrepreneurial journey, I see, and I remember how uncomfortable it was back in 2012. And I see how much I've developed that sense of certainty within myself of like, I'm going to find a way. It doesn't matter what's going to happen. And I'm going to pivot until I make it happen. And also the knowledge that you're going to fail along the way, that you're going to make mistakes, but that you're going to keep picking yourself up and continue to go forward. And that is that level of resourcefulness you get as an entrepreneur. The next one I wanted to discuss that's really important, it's one of the most important lessons I've learned being an entrepreneur, is mentorship. When we first started working on our mindsets back in 2019, one of the things you and I had never done was actually have coaches, and I remember us considering a coach back in 2019 and being like, oh my gosh, that's so much money to spend on a coach. And now here we are, and I regularly spend multiple six figures on my mindset and my coaching every single year. I regularly have at least two coaches I'm learning from at all times. And so a lot of my time, about, I would say at least 4 to 6 days, most months, I'm spending in conferences or learning new things. And then, also the money that I'm spending on mentorship, it's the best money you can spend. First of all, when you are an entrepreneur, and actually I would argue for all of you, even if you're not an entrepreneur right now, your mind is the most valuable thing that you can invest in, because it's going to get better over time and then allow you to see things differently, be able to do things easier. So when you invest in your mind, you become stronger. And so I think about, again, reflecting back to 2012 when I first started this entrepreneurial journey, what I'm able to do now because I've invested in my mind is like a billion X versus what I could do back in 2012. And a lot of that is due to mentorship, due to working with people who were so far ahead of me on their entrepreneurial journey, being able to learn from them about the mistakes that they made along the way, being able to learn from them with the challenges that they're facing, right? Because being a CEO, being an entrepreneur, your whole job is to solve problems. That's it. Your job is to solve problems. And what that means is you just solve problems all day long. And actually, you doctors out there who are full-time clinicians, all you do is solve problems all day long, right? And so that's your job. And so if you can see the other kind of problems that people are having that are 10 steps ahead of you, you can anticipate the problems coming down the road. And so it's not only to learn from their experiences, to have them individually teach you so you can avoid mistakes now, but it's also a really important thing for anticipation of the problems that you're going to face, once you get your business to multi six figures or 7 figures or 8 figures, like what's going to be coming down the pipeline for you. Mentorship is really, really important. So for me, I think that every single dollar that I have ever spent investing in my brain and getting mentors has been, the highest return possible that I've gotten out of any way that I spend money. And so when people ask, what's your largest expense? Or when I reflect on what's my largest expense, it's actually mentorship is my largest expense of our entire family. It's mentorship, and it's well worth it. One way I look at it is, my mentors are on my payroll and they perform incredibly because they're me. It's my brain that's improving. And as I get stronger and stronger, my business gets better and better. The psychology of the owner is a chokehold on the business. So if my psychology is holding the business back, if I'm working on my mindset, if I'm working on my skills, it's going to only get better and better and better. And the business truly reflects you as the leader. The next one is about team members. So most of us start out as solopreneurs. Although you real estate investors, you're not really ever starting out as solopreneurs, right? You start off with a real estate agent, you've got a contractor, you've got a property manager. You're never really solopreneurs. But in a startup, you truly start out as a solopreneur, and it's all just you. And maybe you have a partner, but usually it's just you. And that means you have a limited amount of time and you have a limited number of things that you can do. Well, as your business grows, as you start to reach more people, you can start building your team. And your team is your leverage. Your team allows your business to have greater impact and reach more people. And I think theoretically I understood the value of the team, but I don't think I really fully appreciated the value that a team can bring until I got a lot of A players on my team. So what's an A player? An A player meets the culture of your business and also is able to meet the performance objectives of their job. And A players when they come onto your team, they just blow you away. It's incredible. Within a couple weeks, you're just like, oh my gosh, how did I survive without that individual? Just to give you guys an example, I recently got an A player executive assistant. I have gone through, I think, 7 or 8 executive assistants to be able to get this one. She's so incredible. I mean, my daughter said to me the other day, how frequently are you going to say, so and so is amazing? Like, how frequently are you going to say that to me? And that's just saying it to my 9-year-old daughter. So you can imagine, I repeat it to myself almost every single day because she is that amazing. And so an A player can take so much off of you as the leader, and they can make it, oftentimes they can do it better than you would do it. Like, I can tell you for sure, my executive assistant is doing things better than I could do because I just really hate organization and I hate sitting there and doing files. And like, I just hate that kind of stuff. But she is like organizing things. She's taking things that I've built and she's making them better. And so that team member, if you get the right team member, can really just turbocharge the growth of your business and allow you to be so much more free to be able to operate in your zone of brilliance, is what we call it. We want you operating in your space where you really are energized and excited and dreaming big and filled, right? That's where you want you operating, not only for your personal happiness, but also because it's going to help the business the most when the other members of your team are working in their zone of brilliance. That's really, really helpful to the business. And so those team members, when you find an A player, you will be able to immediately understand how much more they can grow your company, how much more they can grow your business, and you'll experience it instead of theoretically knowing it. And again, I will argue, having hired and fired so many individuals now, that you usually recognize A players within the first 2 weeks of them starting because they absolutely blow you away. And so if you're a business owner and you've had an employee for 1 or 2 or 3 months and you're like making excuses for them or saying you didn't train them enough, or thinking to yourself, well, I just need to help them with this stuff, they're going to get better, like, you probably don't have an A player, because A players, in my experience, they blow you away right away. And boy, they can really help your business at a next level. And they're the people you never want to leave. Like, you never want to lose them. Again, one of my mentors, in actually Keith Cunningham, he says, with a team, you either pay now or you pay later, meaning you either pay them well up front or you pay later when they leave and you have brain damage because you weren't willing to pay them up front. Now you've got to go find somebody. They may not even work out. So yeah, when you find a good A player, you keep them no matter what. Okay, next one is systems and processes. Now, you heard me mention that I don't love systems and processes, but boy, I know the value of systems and processes. I was a hospitalist, for those of you guys who don't know. And so I worked in the ICU for many, many years. Are details my strong suit? Not necessarily, but I absolutely can force myself to do them and do them really, really well. And so there's a difference between what energizes you and what you can do. Details do not energize me, but I can do them, but they drain me if I do all details all day. And so what I've learned is the systems and processes, like, it's so important to set them up correctly in the first place. And then I can kind of back off and I don't have to be so in the weeds. And what's even better is to get a team member who loves systems and processes and loves collecting data for you and loves looking, putting together all the analytics and being able to present to you trends and relationships. And then that allows you to be able to both be in the details, but also yourself not have to be in the weeds of collecting those details or building those systems and processes that may personally drain you. As a side note, I do think that the DISC personality test is really, really helpful to understand what energizes you. Again, it's not what you're capable of doing, it's what energizes you. And so for me on the disc, I'm a strong I, and I is influence. I'm energized by people. I'm not energized by those details. I'm not energized by bookkeeping, for example. I can do the details, but ultimately it's not going to energize me. And so again, I want to spend more of my time in those things that energize me. Systems and processes have to get done. They are part of the key to entrepreneurial success and also freedom for you as a leader of the business is systems and processes. But again, what I would encourage you to do is make sure that you're involved enough to really understand what's going on, maybe even build the first version of things, and then make sure you surround yourself with people on your team who love those systems and processes, who are energized by doing them, so that you can make sure that you have them in your business, because your business will not function as you get more and more revenue if you do not have those systems and processes in place. Your wheels will fall off of the bus, your delivery will be poor, your customer experience will be poor, there will be chaos, and things will not run efficiently. You'll need a lot of extra team members if you don't have the systems and processes, and things will get dropped all the time. And so you need them. You absolutely need them. So I would embrace them as an entrepreneur, systems and processes. And as a real estate investor, if you're listening to this and saying, hey, I only have a couple properties, this is a time to lay out those systems and processes. And what we would suggest, what we do is we actually use project management software to kind of lay them out. We record them on Loom so people can see things getting done. We turn them into SOPs. We use AI to create SOPs based on our Looms. And so other people can follow the systems and processes. And actually, one of my outcomes for all the managers in my team are that there are systems and processes for every position. There are SOPs for every task, for every position, and they are followed by all. And that's actually one of the outcomes by which I decide if a manager is really doing their job. The next one is pivoting. And pivoting is part of being an entrepreneur. It's part of life. Change is inevitable. Even if something worked one year, it does not mean that it worked the next year. The environment can change, laws can change, your customer tastes can change, the economy can change. So many things change all the time. Things can be going great and you think they're going to go great forever and they don't. Or things can be, you can have the worst sale ever, or you can have the worst real estate deal ever. And it doesn't mean the next one's going to be that way at all. Like, it's actually, change is a natural part of life. Everything changes and everything ends. And so you have to learn to pivot as an entrepreneur, because if you don't know how to pivot, if you don't know how to deal with change, you're done. It's not going to work, because change will happen to you all the time. Now, there is a normal change that happens as you develop your business to different levels, of revenues, and then also different levels of systems and processes that you put into businesses. There are predictable changes and challenges that your business will go through. But again, there are really unpredictable changes and challenges, like a lawsuit, right? Or a legal change that you didn't see coming that can completely change the whole mien of what's going on in your business, and you have to pivot. One of the things that we sometimes do is we'll be angel investors in new startups, and we're looking at their business plan, of course, but we're actually betting on the jockey. Why? Because things are going to change. And what we really need to know is that the jockey is going to face those changes. The CEO, by jockey, I mean the CEO or the business founder, is going to face those changes, and they're going to be able to pivot, and they're going to be able to figure it out. And we understand that what business they start with may not be the business that they have 2 or 3 years down the road, because they may recognize a new opportunity or something might change and they have to pivot. And so I'm looking for people who have that resourcefulness, who have that ability to pivot, who understand that change is a natural part of business, and ideally who have a history of being able to build successful businesses, because they probably face those challenges and change, and they learn to deal with them and to work with them, to actually see life is always happening for you. How can I take this and make it into an opportunity? The next one I wanted to mention is that being an entrepreneur really helps you understand who you are at a deeper level. Wow, this goes back to the resourcefulness. This goes back to the mindset. This goes back to all the challenges that you're going to face as an entrepreneur. All of it kind of comes together. You get to see what you're made of, and you get to build yourself into a different individual through the experience of entrepreneurship. It is not always easy, right? There are times, even let's say you're a multi-million-dollar entrepreneur, there are times you're still going to fail. There's times that you're going to not anticipate something, and there's going to be a challenge. There's going to be times when you look back and you're like, oh, I wish I had done that differently. So you're going to have those opportunities to grow, those mistakes, those learning opportunities all the time. And what that allows you to do is really to see who you're meant to be, to see who you are, to see what you're made of, to see how you pick yourself up and how you carry yourself, to see how you show up for your employees when things aren't going right, to see how you still manage to lead a balanced life or an imbalanced life. I mean, there's no such thing as balance, but how you manage to show up for your kids, for your family. Being an entrepreneur really tests you. It really pushes you. I think it's one of the most beautiful things you can do to really develop your potential, because it takes a lot of you. It takes your heart, it takes your soul, it takes you really contributing and having a meaningful thing that you're going for. Because listen, if you don't have a really meaningful why, if you don't have a bigger reason beyond yourself, entrepreneurship is just not, you're going to give up. You absolutely are going to give up, because it's not always easy. And if you have that bigger why, if you have something you're bringing to the world that's going to help somebody or help a group of people or make a real change in people's lives, help transform them, then you have that bigger why beyond yourself. Then entrepreneurship, even through the challenges, becomes okay, because you can work through it, because ultimately you're doing something meaningful and useful to others. If entrepreneurship for you is just about the money or just about being recognized, you're not going to last. You absolutely need a bigger purpose and meaning to it. And the cool thing is you will find out who you are. And then also, you are not a fixed individual, right? If you believe in the growth mindset and read this book by Carol Dweck, it's so powerful. You develop through challenges. You become who you are through facing setbacks. Another way to say it is self-confidence is built by doing hard things. And so when you start a business, who you are today will not be the same person as you are a year from now or 2 years from now or 3 years from now. You really develop as a human being through doing a business. And so I think that I want people to realize, when I thought through, like, what are the messages I wanted to get to you guys about the most important things that I've learned from being an entrepreneur. This is one of the main ones, is that being an entrepreneur will not necessarily be easy. It will be challenging. It will be, sometimes you'll wonder like why you did it. Sometimes you'll wonder, am I really cut out for it? But what you will get at the end is you will get a different version of yourself, a version of yourself that meets more of what's possible and more of your potential as a human being. And that's a really beautiful thing, because you're becoming who you must be for the rest of the world. And you're contributing something beautiful and meaningful that changes people's lives if you have that bigger why. And when you give, then it comes back to you in spades. It really does come back to you. So go out there, and if you see a change that needs to be made in the world, if you see something that you can help make better for other people, you can reduce other people's suffering, you can help them have better lives, like, go out and take that risk, right? Because in the process of doing it, you become a different person, and that person is the person you were meant to be, and that you needed that discomfort and those challenges to mold you into that individual. And so I think that there's no higher calling than being an entrepreneur with a purpose and a deeper meaning, and beautiful things will come as a result. So those are all kind of my biggest takeaways, my biggest learnings from being an entrepreneur, put together, packaged into a podcast, a fairly short podcast. Hopefully you guys learned a lot about what it feels to be an entrepreneur. And again, hopefully you realize that it applies to you, whether you're doing your own clinic, you're a real estate entrepreneur, or maybe you're just thinking about entrepreneurship and you have an idea and it's going to do some really great things in the world and you're not sure about making the leap. I really encourage you to make the leap. You're going to learn a lot no matter what, and you're going to become more resourceful. You're going to learn the importance of a team. You're going to learn about systems and processes and all those things that you learn. Maybe it's not that first business that, takes off, but maybe it's the third business that you do. Who knows? It's all a journey, and it's a journey of becoming. It's a journey of becoming the person that you must be to be able to give your gifts to the world. Thank you for joining us, or joining me, on this episode of the Doctors Building Wealth podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend and subscribe to our podcast, and we will see you next time.